my God. Candelita returns to Citi Field tonight. And Mets fans, you better give this guy a standing ovation, because what you're seeing in the 2025 Mets is why we cherish the 2024 Mets so much. And I know they lost in the National League Championship Series, but the vibes, the energy, the aura, the 2024 season, me and a lot of other people regard as the best season of our lives. I'm 34 years old, and that says a lot about this franchise, but it also says a lot about how special the OMG Grimace Mets were. And to have a backup infielder get called up from the minor leagues, and the day he comes up, the team goes from 11 games over 500 to making the playoffs and 2 wins away from a pennant. You know, you can't overlook just what Jose Iglesias meant to that team. And you're seeing chemistry issues with this team. Listen, for the people who are saying this team doesn't have chemistry issues, I'm convinced you don't pay attention and you have no idea about what's going on, because the 2024 team had that it factor. They had that juice. They had that comeback ability. This team hasn't done that once all year. So, you know, if you're not thinking that's a factor, then I'm convinced you don't know ball. So that's why you give him a standing O. Like, cheer for Jose Iglesias. The Mets were dumb enough to not give him that 1-year, $4 million deal. They could have afforded it. They chose to go elsewhere because they had a lot of infielders, and the reasoning is valid. You know, they had an influx of guys at the position. You had Mauricio, you have Beatty, you have Vientos, you have McNeil. You know, there wasn't really a spot. You had Luis Angel Acuna. You know, they decided to go Nick Madrigal, who got hurt on the first play in spring training. That obviously was a terrible mistake, going with Madrigal over Iglesias. But the reality is he was a big factor. And without Jose Iglesias last year, I'm sorry, I don't think the Mets do what they did last year. I don't think McNeil coming back or any other player kind of helps the Mets more. And it's not just the song. And by the way, how often does, it's never happened, does an infielder come out from the minor leagues, make a number one record, and hit 330 and hit almost 400 with runners in scoring position? I mean, he wasn't just having a good year on and off the field. He was good in the clutch, too. Anytime you had runners on, you wanted Jose Iglesias up. You wanted Candelita up, and it was just a base hit. It was a double, a stolen base, a defensive play. He was an absolute joy to watch out there. And, you know, the Padres are in a better position than the Mets, and I'm not saying it's because of him, because, yes, he's hitting 230 this year. He's not having a great year. He's on base under 300. But you have to figure he's played a factor in that clubhouse. He is a part-time player there. You know, when the Mets brought him up, he ended up becoming almost a full-time player because you couldn't keep him off the field. He was one of the best hitters on the team. So Lindor's clutch ability last year, Iglesias' ability were huge. It wasn't Pete Alonso last year until the playoffs and the homer in Milwaukee. It was Lindor and it was Iglesias as the two guys that really propelled the Mets, you know, along with good starting pitching. But those were the two guys in this lineup that propelled them. And the Mets will get to see Iglesias tonight. The Mets and the Padres, a massive series. The Mets lead is 1.5 now over the Diamondbacks, 2 over the Reds, 2 over the Giants. Giants lead the tiebreaker. Arizona tiebreaker to be determined. Padres tiebreaker to be determined still. But the wild card is tight, and this is the final 12 games. You got 6 home, 6 road. 3 Padres, 3 Nationals, 3 in Chicago against the Cubs, and then 3 to close the season against the Marlins in Miami. This is a tough series. Padres are a good team, and it begins tonight. It starts tonight. It starts tonight. For the Padres, it'll be Michael King, who has had a fantastic season. And for the Mets, it's time for the piggyback Mets, and it begins tonight. Clay Holmes will start. Sean Manaea out of the bullpen as the piggyback. The Mets, remember, did this, like I said, on yesterday's show in Kansas City, last day before the All-Star break, and it worked pretty well. Mets lost the game, but both pitchers pitched well. The Mets just didn't hit. So you're going to see probably Holmes for 4. I'd imagine Manaea 3 or 4. Let's see if it works, because like I've talked about here for months, this is the piggyback era now for the Mets. Come October, this is what you're going to see. And I don't know how they're going to employ it. It could be Sanga Tong. McLean might be the only one at this point who you're comfortable giving you 5 or 6. But I think Holmes Manaea is going to be going to the playoffs, one of the games. I think it could be, you know, Peterson maybe as the other, or Peterson, Sanga. Maybe it's McLean as its own, Peterson, Sanga as another, Holmes, Manaea as the other, and those are your 3. and then you just keep going with those three pairs. But, this you're going to see a lot of this if the Mets get into the playoffs and if they go on a run. This will be the way that they can find a way to win. Now, obviously, the offense has to do their job. That goes without saying. But in terms of starting pitching, which has been the Mets' bugaboo since their collapse beginning in mid-June, that's going to be the way to fix this, because we know Holmes isn't a 5 or 6 inning pitcher. We know Manaea's not a 5 or 6 inning pitcher. Kodai Senga's not a 5 or 6 inning pitcher. David Peterson at this point is not looking like a 6 inning pitcher, maybe 5. Noel McLean's the only one that looks like a 5 or 6 inning pitcher where you can go normal starter to bullpen. You could go 6 McLean, then go Rogers, and then maybe Diaz for 2 innings in the playoffs. So let's see tonight if it worked. We saw it in Kansas City once. I'm looking forward to seeing it again, because Sean Manaea is not a starter right now for the Mets. And Clay Holmes is not beyond a 3 or 4 inning guy. So we'll see when Carlos Mendoza pulls the trigger on making the switch. When does he see that they start and get in trouble? It could be 3 innings and then 2 base runners in the 4th. You might see Manaea in the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing this strategy, because it's the strategy and the only way the Mets can maybe go on a deep run. And, it better work, because as fun as Sunday's win was, the reality is the Mets are playing terrible baseball, and they got to wake up and got to do it in front of your home fans, Final 6 at home this week. Guys we might not see down the stretch, but Mets Player Development Awards, Carson Bench is your Player of the Year, and Jonah Tong is your Pitcher of the Year. Now, Carson Bench has come up to AAA, and he hasn't been good. Now, it's only been 18 games, 68 at-bats, but he's 9 for 69, 1 homer, 8 RBIs, 2 stolen base, hitting 130 with a 197 on base. But Bench, worked his way up here. He probably wasn't ready. He probably needed more time in AA. But the Mets said, the season's ending. Let's get him at the highest level and see. Carson Bench is not going to be ready, guys, for the opening day center field job. And I think a lot of Mets fans want him to be, opening day center fielder, or Jet Williams opening day center fielder. I don't think the Mets are comfortable going that route opening day next year, or people wanted them to come up this year. That's not happening. But I think it's good to see how successful Benj was. I mean, it's single A, 302, 417 on base in 60 games. Double A, 317, 407 on base in 32 games. He probably just needs more than 32 games at the Double A level. Now, he might start next year still at Triple A and an offseason, getting after it. Mets comfortable putting him at Triple A, and maybe by mid-season next year, Benj is here. But listen, he's quickly propelled. This was his first year in the minors. He only played 15 games in 2024 in the minor leagues, in Port St. Lucie. So this is his first real year. He still has to develop. He's 22 years old and just has a year now of minor league experience. So to say by June next year might even be unrealistic. So give him a chance. And Jonah Tong, listen, another guy who kind of the Mets had to rush up here to get to the big league level, who shows he's not ready. And I don't think it's on the fault of him. But I don't think Jonah Tong is going to be part of this playoff Mets pitching staff. I just don't think you could be comfortable with that. But where Jonah Tong, I think, can be successful here for the Mets, I make him a 1-inning reliever. I think his delivery and his stuff, he could be successful in a 1-inning spot, whether it's the 5th or the 6th inning. Not the back innings, but a middle inning, I could see Jonah Tong having success. But I don't know if that's going to be the time right now for the Mets with 2 weeks left in the playoffs, if they'll have faith in him to do that. But Jonah Tong dominated Double A. He's going to be part of this team at some point next year. I think he likely starts next year at Triple A, and by Memorial Day, maybe he's in the rotation. But the Mets have a lot of starters. Not a bad problem to have. Brandon Sproat's pitching like a guy that looks like to be part of the opening day rotation next year. Noel McLean, I think, is a lock at this point to be part of the opening day rotation next year, knock on wood. But I don't think Jonah Tong is there yet. And that's fine, because the Mets put him in a tough spot. I'm Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live. Scan this code, become a Mets Daily Insider member. Again, still, if you're a member and you're able to go Thursday, let us know. Today's the last day. If not, I'm going to give away the tickets on Thursday on Twitter, on X, at Jake Brown Live. So follow me there. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that thumbs up. And comment below. Iglesias, standing ovation. Give him the standing O. Are you? Also, do you like the piggyback? Do you still believe the Mets are going to the playoffs? A 1.5 lead. 12 games to go. It starts tonight at Citi Field. Can't wait. Mets Padres. Looking forward to the game. Enjoy if you're going. Thanks for watching Mets Daily, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Let's go, Mets.